What's going on, beautiful people? It's your brother Mowa Olodumare out here, and I don't really want much, y'all. I'm gonna be studying, studying for my MLIS course that we got going on here. This particular class that I'm studying is research design, and the other class that I'm taking right now is academic libraries. To be honest with you, the academic library course so far is actually a little bit different than what I thought it was going to be. It's actually dropping a lot of interesting knowledge and science on uh, key ways to navigate in that space. I come from a public library background, but I have academic proclivities. So it'll be interesting to see if my life path happens to come across an academic library and I believe that everything happens in divine timing and things like that. So, me learning these things about the academic libraries, it's going to be some valuable information. And maybe I'll go through it at another point. But tonight, I'm studying for my other course, which is research design. This class also is a very interesting one because it gives both of the classes are given blueprints of basically how to navigate into the higher realms of academia. I guess I could say at its best. When I say at its best, it means unfettered by immature acts of racism and prejudice and things like that. But both of these courses are giving me a deeper insight of what the academic library world is looking like, and in many senses, it's preparing me for that, preparing me for that next challenge that's obviously going to be forthcoming, um, because the information is coming across, to me, right here and now. For those who do know me, know that one of my ultimate goals is to be a professor. um every day it seems like my passion of which way I'm going to go almost changes, because I have a passion for language and literacy for sure. But learning more about the research design and the academic libraries and stuff like that, and maybe information science, library information science might be my PhD, maybe archives, maybe this, maybe there's so many things that I want to learn. Um, but I don't know where I'm going to go with it. At least in this realm of academia. But if my life has shown anything so far, one thing I know for sure is that things will be made clear as long as I stay the path. So that's one thing I'm definitely going to do is I'm going to stay the path and continue with my studies, continue with everything else that I have planned for myself. And I have utmost faith in that the path that needs to be taken will be the path that is going to be cleared for me to take. It's just the way that I've always lived my life. There's no way there's nowhere to go other than the path that I'm on. There's nowhere there's nothing to see other than the stuff that's on my path for me to take. You know what I mean? And it's like that's just the way that I've always, I can't say always, but that mindset is what kind of formulated my philosophy of life. If you are here, it's because you are supposed to be here for a particular reason. And once that reason is done and over with, you no longer be here. That just seems how life seems to work for a brother. You know what I mean? So it's just a matter of, when things are attracted, allow it to attract, and when the things are, dispelled away from me, I gotta let those things happen, just as well, and not be so attached to what I might have thought was supposed to happen or whatever the case is, and just know it is what it is. So what I'm doing right now is I'm logging into my Blackboard for my class here, and in this course, research design and evaluation is the name of the course. Um, um, I lost what I was going to say. But yeah, I'm about to go over some. um, presentations here. A couple of them that I just got to catch up on. I'm not really behind, but um, got to stay on point, especially since this is kind of a um, go at your own pace kind of class, which I'm not really a fan of, but it is what it is. So let's get one of these. So then I watch. Apparently, I watched these, but I want to go back. I will go back, but I'm gonna watch the ones that I see. How long is this one? Uh,
Search questions and problem statements. You will also be able to identify characteristics that relate to the general quality of specific research questions. Last but not least, you will be able to apply principles of quality research questions in the creation of original ones, which will guide your own investigation. So, just to say, by the end of this lesson, you should be able to create a good research question that will guide you in a research project. So, what is a research question? So, this information comes from the Form Plus blog, and I think it's one of the best that I've found, which is in many cases, the textbooks come up with materials and they tell you what thing the research question is. So, what is a research question? So, this information comes from the Form Plus blog, and I think it's one of the best that I've found, which is in many cases, the textbooks come up with materials and they tell you what thing the research question is, but I really like this definition. So, a research question is a specific inquiry which the research seeks to provide a response to. So, one of the things that I see a lot as a professor is the use of questions, for example, rhetorical questions as writing. Um, Devices. So people try. It's a accepted way to write. You start to write something interesting. You're supposed to start with a question and a general question. However, in research, we are not just going to be writing questions just for fun or just as a writing implement. We're using questions to guide a specific research project. And I will ask everyone to, when you write for this class, only present the research questions. If a question is not going to be intended to find a response to that question, just don't include it. So please stay away from the rhetorical question presentation. Because in this context, we are going to be using actual research questions. And those are the ones we are seeking to provide a response to them. So another thing that a research question does is it helps clarify and define the path of the research process. The research question will influence the methodology that we take. It will help define the setting, the sample, so the people or the instances that we will need to gather information from. And in the end, it will also guide the most important part of a research paper, which is the findings. In this class, you're not writing the full research paper, you're going to be writing a research proposal. But still, the research question is the foundation. And if the research question is not a strong one, then it becomes really hard to write. Starting off with a good research question is a great way to start with a solid foundation in the research process. So last but not least, a research question focuses on the research.
Now, some important talk that she was saying, about the rhetorical writing. I can't remember if it was her or not, but I remember on a paper I did get docked for being accused of writing rhetorical writing, even though I defended my paper because I addressed the question that I was asking in that paper, but I disagreed with the claim. But the fact that it was pointed out, and they felt that it was, I definitely understand what they're talking about, and I think this was like really an issue with my earlier writings, like in my undergrad, because I come from a artistic background when it comes to writing poetry and so on and so forth. Um, so like coming from that background, I have these literary agents at use that I can use to integrate within my my research work or academic work or whatever the case is. But the thing is, there's a time and a place for it. So now more matured, I now am going through the process of perfecting the meshing between the artistic side of writing and the research side of writing, because I don't feel that research writing and stuff like that has to be as boring as it is. You can still write with passion and things like that. It's not like necessarily writing a poem, but I, I, I it doesn't have to be dry. And I try my best not to make any of my writings dry, no matter if it's a research project or whatever. um but this is some great stuff, and I don't know how and when this is going to come up again, but I know it is. I mean, if anything else, um on my next educational journey, because I do plan on pursuing my PhD.
Topic, and it determines the methodology, the hypotheses for quantitative study. It guides the stages of the inquiry, so which parts my research is going to have. Is it going to be gather data straightforward, or is it, do I need to do it and divide it into specific instances of collecting data, the analysis of that data, even how I'm presenting that data. So research questions, as I mentioned, are the foundation. That's why they are so important in this process. Another aspect about research questions is, what do they do? So they organize the project and they give direction and coherence. And interestingly enough, it doesn't sound like much, but sometimes in the writing process we get lost in the weeds, we especially when we already have data that we have gathered, we might get a little lost. It's like we're finding so many interesting things, but the research questions help keep us on topic. Another thing it does is delimits the project. It shows its boundaries. In a research project, you're not supposed to research absolutely everything, because the more you cover, the less well you're going to do it. So the worse you're going to do it, the more loosely things are going to be fitting into a research project. So the research questions help us just create this perfect little bounded environment in which we are going to be conducting the research. The more elements we add into a research project, the more complicated it gets, and in many cases, the worse we are going to be off, or the quality of the project. goes down as it grows and the topics are too big. Another thing is that research projects keep the researcher focused during the project. I generally, when I have a research project, it's become my practice to write the research questions in a little sheet of paper that I keep on a post-it note, either on the computer panel or on a wall. That every time I'm like, wait a minute, what am I doing? I go back and I read the research questions. Oh, okay, this is what I'm doing. So it keeps me focused instead of just having this, ooh, shiny kind of moment. So I should not, when we do research, we should not be looking like cats chasing a laser pointer. We should be very focused. Although, well, you've seen a cat looking at a laser pointer, you know what focus is. So another thing that a research question allows to do is provide a framework for writing up the project. So we had talked, I had mentioned the delimitation of the project. So it prevents the project from getting so big that the quality suffers. But it also helps you write it. And especially important when you have to publish for work in academic libraries, that is more and more common that you have to be present research and produce research. So having a research question, it's a very nice circle. You started with a question, you collected data, you analyzed that data, and you found an answer for the question. So you come around that cycle and that circle, and then you move on to another question. Or it can be, oh, now that looks like a bomb, like one of those cartoonish bombs, or like a cherry. But one of the things that you will notice is that if you don't have a good research question, there's going to be a lot of problems because you're not going to be able to circle back. So you're going to find an answer, but that's not the one for what you should have been asking. So there's going to be a lot of loose ends.
Mhm.
It is not uncommon to finish a research project and finish with more questions than you when you started, but at least that research question should be answered to a certain degree. And that's what it helps you provide that framework. Think of a painting inside a frame. The framework does the same for research. So instead of just looking at absolutely everything, so instead of looking at the picture with the wall, with the entire room, it actually just delimits the area. So this is the painting, and that's it. The rest, that's where the wall begins. And that's a good thing that research questions can help us a lot with. Another thing that it provides is they point out to the data that will be needed. In research methods, and my professors, I remember one professor of ours was always telling us that you don't choose your method first. For practical reasons, some people do. Some people say, I'm going to do a survey, and survey it is. But that shouldn't be the process. The process should be coming up with a question. And after you have that question, you sit down and think, what kind of data and from whom or from where do I need to answer this question? So the process should be the question guides the methodology. So the data needed is what's going to be defined in the methodology. So I need to start with the question to then determine what kind of data do I need to answer that question. And that should be a logical connection. So another thing with research questions is that we have some levels of abstraction. And I want you to take a close look here at what I'm going to be presenting, because this is where we really get lost. And by we, I mean, I still get very lost in this after, well, quite a long time conducting my own research. But this happens quite often. So think of production of research questions as a process. You start with a research area, then you move on to a research topic. Then you start with general research questions. Those research questions are big and might be answered by multiple studies or multiple iterations of picking up data and selecting data, but they're big, so they're going to like guide a lot, have too much to be answered straightforward. And last but not least, this is what we're looking for. We're looking for creation of those specific research questions that can guide a research project. So let's look at some examples here. A very common research area is in our field, it would be to pick the type of library. Mind you, it doesn't have to be this way. We can define the research area differently into the realm of information. But this is one of the easiest ways I can help you visualize what a research area is. So if somebody asks me, what do I research? I can say, I research academic libraries. In my case, that is partly true. Actually, my research I characterize as the study of engagement with information in various environments. So as you can see, that is huge, but it helps people see more or less where my research falls. So the same thing here. When as you start exploring your interest, I want you to think in these terms. And you can start with either a general research area, broad and big, or and universal too, or you can start with something as straightforward as the type of library that you're interested in. If you're interested in a specific type of library, might be that you're interested, like me, in an actual phenomenon that moves beyond libraries. But in this case, a research area would be something like academic libraries. From academic libraries as a research area, and for many years, I defined that as my research area. Eventually, I started adding other projects to my research agenda because research is part of my job. Um, I started adding those, and that's when things got a little complicated. And I could no longer say, well, no, now I'm studying public libraries and I'm studying information outside of libraries. So that's when I started modifying the language. So I want you to think about what would be your research area, something you're interested in that is big and broad. It can be as specific, but still broad, like the type of library, academic libraries, public libraries, school libraries. It can be a little bit more specific, rural public libraries. It can be large research academic libraries. Title One schools, libraries in Title I schools, sorry. So that can be a research area as well. So in this case, I went very broad. I went with academic libraries, and that is my research area. From the research area, I can get a lot of topics. Actually, I can get quite a few. But let's just look at some topics that derive. The topics are a little bit more specific. They actually add more components too. So we start with something general like, oh, academic libraries. But now in the topics, we start adding components that make it a little bit more contained. So we have information literacy among college students. And that's something that a lot of academic librarians study. They study one of the main populations that they serve, and that being college students. Another topic that we can come up with under the area of academic libraries would be employment conditions of academic librarians working in research intensive institutions. So as you can see here, research intensive institutions is actually a Carnegie classification language. Carnegie classifies academic institutions according to research output, among many other categories. So you have the high research, research intensive, high research production, low research production, etc. There's like a few classifications. So that I'm using language from that is common in academic librarianship. In this case, the Carnegie nomenclature to actually classify academic institutions in the United States. So as you can see here, the first topic was looking at libraries serving students. So one of the main patron bases. In here, I am, in the second one, I am actually moving the focus of the topic from the students to the actual librarians. So it stays kind of like in the library itself, rather than go to a client. So it's more like it's an internal thing. But what you notice is that both are unequivocally related to academic libraries. I can come up with other topics. For example, implication of artificial intelligence for cataloging departments in liberal arts colleges. Another Carnegie classification, liberal art colleges in the United States. Implications of artificial intelligence. Here we have a broader topic that is happening and it's really hot since it's debuted in the debut of open based and freely available ChatGPT. In 2022, this topic has been getting really hot. And I'm applying something that is very general to a very specific function inside a library environment. And again, implications of artificial intelligence for cataloging departments in liberal arts colleges, still very much under the area of academic libraries. Another topic that I can come up with is the use of academic library and student retention. So there's actually a body of work out there of librarians who dedicate themselves to studying this, or professionals, in some cases faculty in different library information science programs do the same. So how the use of the academic library can support students staying in college and finishing their degree, what they came for. Again, still very much an academic library topic, but it has different components that actually make it a little bit more specific. Is that specific enough to create a question? It needs a few more things to actually create a research question. These are too broad. In here, you're talking more along the lines of themes. This is a theme. We have the area, we have the topic, and they're still just sentences. But as we move into the creation of questions, that's what we need to do, to keep making it more and more specific to the point that it's manageable and in a way that we can respond to them with actual collection of data.
Peace.
At this
What's going
point,
on,
we don't
y'all?
even have questions. So
Let's get
let's
my
look
study
at
on.
what else do we
Holla at me
need
if you
to
want to
add to
holler.
come up with research questions. So this information actually comes from a different scholar than you have for this class. I have assigned the book by Radford and Mary Radford and Conaway. However, this comes from a researcher. His name is Keith Punch, and he wrote this really brilliant book that I love about information or research in the social sciences. So I modified his topic because his was kind of dark. It was about like it was a school-based topic, but it was about like child suicide because of pressures in school. I'm like, whoa, that's kind of dark. And I modified it to become more library friendly so that you can have a very straightforward example. So we move from a research topic to a general question. A general question is still not a research question. It might be too big still to guide a specific research question. Doesn't mean you cannot do it. The problem is the more general your question is, the more confusing your study can get. And we don't want confusing. We want a research proposal that is straightforward, doable, and something that if you want to develop into an actual research project, you can do that. So I picked the topic factors associated with information literacy among college students. Yet another topic. So I can create general questions around that. So if I'm thinking about what influences information literacy with students that are enrolled in universities, in colleges in the United States. So a general research question can be, what is the relationship between educational background factors and the degree of information literacy? Notice here, if you have taken other classes, you know information literacy is a huge topic on its own. And it's not exclusive of academic libraries or school libraries or even public libraries. It's actually a general topic. So it doesn't list any specific aspects or topics within information literacy. Another thing you notice here is educational background factors. It's not specific either. I'm not talking here about whether students went to private school versus public schools, well-funded public schools versus not well-funded public schools, rural versus urban. I can keep going. Charter versus public. What like educational background factors are huge, are different. And I am not even saying a single one of them. I'm just saying how the background of the educational experience of the students are going to affect, or to which degree will be related to, information literacy factors. But I'm not defining any of them. So once more, what I have here is a general research question. I can say, hey, I researched the relationship between educational factors and the degree of information literacy of college students. I didn't even add the college student part. So
Peace, peace,
again,
peace.
it's very general. It gives you an idea of what it's looking at, and it's already delimiting the topic. However, it's not enough to drive a research project. Look at the other example question. What is the relationship between library experience factors and the degree of awareness of information literacy issues? Information literacy issues. Again, am I defining them? No. Am I saying good ones, bad ones? No. Again, library experience factors. Well, what kind of library experience factors? Borrowing books, knowing how to use the databases, talking to a librarian, attending classes at a library. What kind of library? Public, research, school? Again, not defined. It actually gives me a delimitation of the topic that I had picked for this specific example, but it's not specific enough. It's already presented as a research question, but it's not specific enough. And we will have tons of these general questions. However, the point of a research question is the specific research question.
Right.
So we need to bring it down to size. So we have here from the general research question, what is the relationship between library experience and the degree of awareness of information literacy issues? We can come up with a specific question. So actually, I came up with two, a larger question and a sub question, which which is needed to answer the larger question. My recommendation usually is to keep it simple. One, maybe two questions. One larger question with one associated smaller question for this type of work. Two is good. Three, you might be getting out there. By four questions, I will need to bring you down because you're making things complicated for yourself, most likely, or your questions are way too simplistic, so they can be collapsed into different ones. So, what are the research questions? Specific research questions, and these are the kind of questions that I would ask or use to write a research project, a research proposal, and a research paper. It's the specific ones. So, which ones I came up with? The first one is, what is the relationship between academic library use and the rate of information literacy? Now I'm talking about specifics. Is still kind of like I have to define that because what is academic library use? Do I mean sitting down in the library? Do I mean borrowing materials from the collection? Do I mean going to the website of the library? The same with the information literacy rate. But in the literature, I can define those things. The secondary question is, do rates of information literacy differ between academic library users and non-users? This is a related question. In general, this second question would not be able to carry an entire research paper. I haven't discussed that, but let me just say something important. A research question should never be answerable with a yes or a no. And this question, the rates of information literacy, anything that starts with do, my research antenna go beep 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 beep, because that makes this a yes or no type of question. And people say, well, it's an open or closed question. Well, we can have a closed question in which we ask what aspects do we need to list in order to be information literate? And that is still closed because there is only a number. It is an expected, it's answerable with an expected number of factors. It's the yes nos that are dangerous. So a yes no question will not carry an entire research project. However, a yes no type questions can be associated with a larger research question, as is the case here. And so that is an example of how to create specific research questions. Let's go in and have and see more ways in which we actually evaluate research questions. So here it is. Which are the ways in which we assess the quality of the research questions? The first one is a research question needs to be clear. They also needs to be specific. It needs to be empirical. It needs to be interconnected, especially when you have more than one, and substantively relevant. So what do we have? What does clear mean? Clear means that it's a question that is easy to understand, is unambiguous, and you know what you're talking about directly. So I'm talking about information literacy, not about just literacy. So, because literacy can include information literacy, financial literacy, actual literacy, like being able to read and write. So, I picked a very specific area already. So, I made it clear what is the topic. And there's no doubt when I say information literacy of what I'm talking about. There is literature out there already published in the peer-reviewed publications about information literacy. I even know where to look for. A research question also needs to be specific. So concepts are specific enough that they connect the data and its indicators. I intentionally made the questions in the example a little bit less so, mainly because I would prefer for you to come up with your own and not use the one that I have. So this is not ideal. This is only to present the case and the progression. Um, um, Mainly because I would prefer for you to come up with your own and not use the one that I have. So this is not ideal. This is only to present the case and the progression. But a research question should be specific. The concept needs to be specific enough to connect data to indicators. So these questions are not specific. Again, information, academic library use. It's not letting me know if I mean online resources or if I mean books and the physical collection, the actual physical space, specific classes offered at the library. I would need to be much more specific. Another aspect that you need to consider is that a research question needs to be empirical. It needs to be answerable with data. It requires data collection. If it's something that it's already being studied and like over and over again, we need to look for new areas to which we can find information. Another thing is the research question should not be rhetorical. It should not be written for style. If you write a question that is too general or too philosophical, then you are making your question really hard to actually answer. Therefore,
I
your
spent
research
time saying
project
that,
is going to
so
run
that's
into a
that's
huge
definitely a
snag.
big. And she's right.
Another aspect is when you have multiple research questions, they need to be interconnected. They relate to each other. I've had I read a lot of dissertations and I've had to go to PhD students and be like, your question one does not relate to your question two. Either pick one topic or another. I've had one time I read one proposal that was centered around collection development, but one of the questions was about the history of the library. And it was like, okay, I can see why the confusion, but if you're talking about collection development, keep all the questions centered on collection development, especially if that is going to be your area of research. Um, Another one, and last here, is that a research question needs to be substantively relevant. That means that it's something interesting, it's something worthy of investment or investigation, and your research efforts. Many times I see questions that are just so simplistic, already answered, tried and true, and that's not going to contribute much. You might even get bored with those kinds of questions. So another aspect that I wanted to talk is to give you this example. Does information literacy levels differ, or do information literacy levels differ between individuals of different income levels? Well, that would be the first thing. It has a typo there. It should be do, not does. I will look at that. Another thing that I have here is the question is not clear. Information literacy levels? What are those information literacy levels? Individuals of different income levels. Who are those individuals? Are we talking about children? Are we talking about adults? Are we talking about employed people, college age people,
I see.
people enrolled in universities? Or are we just talking about specific location, residents of South Carolina, specific races, or ethnic specific groups? Who are these individuals? This question is not clear. This question is not focused enough. It's still way too big, way too broad. Different income levels is also problematic. So, what are the income levels? There's different ways of defining income levels, so we have to be more specific. Another thing is the question complex. This question is complex, but it might be too complex. And it yields its complexity from the aspects of being way unclear and unfocused. And it has a typo. Let me open and close with that. So when you write your research question, look for those aspects. Remember, from the previous section, is it clear? Is it specific? Is it empirical? Is it interconnected? And is it substantively relevant? That's the test your question has to pass. And you should be analyzing them from that point of view. And just to prove that, like my mom says, even the best hunters will miss the rabbit, well, here are 3 research questions that I explored in one of my research papers that was published. This paper is already published. It was published a few years ago. Actually, it came out this year, but it was published a few years ago. Backlog in the journal. So I was researching the information behaviors, not just information seeking, but information behaviors in general, of Spanish speaking Latinx who lived in the United States, specifically in the Boston area. So I wrote these research questions and I was using them to actually guide myself through it. And my co author was like, Monica, what's that? And I'm like, what's what? That first question. Look at it. It's my first question, my primary question. And look at it. Do members of the Latinx community living in the Boston metropolitan area use libraries, archives, and museums? What is the problem with that? Well, my dear students, if you said, but professor, that's a yes no kind of question, didn't your Spidey research senses go bling, 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 bling when you saw that? No. I thought it was like a brilliant research question. So again, it's a yes, no. Easy modifiable. because easily modifiable. So, and we did. And actually, that was the question that I was answering, was not so much whether they were using these or not, it was the level to which they were using it. And one of the levels can be not using it. Actually, we found out they were not using the archives. They didn't even have awareness of archives, but they were using libraries and they were using museums. So again, it wasn't do they? Yes, no. That's too simplistic. So it was more about at what level they were engaging with each one of these institutions. The other second question was, what are their perceptions of these organizations? And that is a perfectly good research question. So what is the perception of members of the Latinx community living in Boston metropolitan area? Oh, yes, Latinx community. That is huge. I was actually looking at SP, Spanish, SS, sorry, SS. It's just that I think I wrote it SSP. Spanish speaking, Latinx, because Latinx also includes Portuguese people, or people from Brazil who speak Portuguese, people from Jamaica who speak English, people from Haiti who speak French Creole. So I was not looking at those other groups. I was looking specifically at Spanish speakers. But in the beginning, because we were just using shorthand, we were just saying Latinx. Eventually, that was modified, I think, or at least put in the context of the literature review. And last but not least, what are the information organization? What can information organizations do in order to entice more Latinx to use their services? And we did answer that question as well. So based on the data of interviewing 13 Spanish-speaking Latinx members of the Spanish-speaking Latinx community that lived in the Boston metropolitan area at the time. So as you can see, this is very time-consuming, and it can be that even if you understand what you're doing, you still get it wrong. So I want you to go at this process with an open mind, and be very careful not to make these mistakes. In the next section, and that is part of this lesson, I'm going to be talking about problem statements. So I hope this information is useful.
Right. Yeah, that was good information, man. That was good information. It's like you can't do correct research until you know what question to ask, and what the question has to be specific. So, based off of what was just said here, so the research area for me, if I'm going to keep the same theme that I was working on, the research area, which is the broadest thing, would be literacy. Then the research topic I would think would be like, let's see, the failing um Spelling. So the research area, which is the broadest thing of it all, is literacy. The research topic is the failing percentage of literacy proficiency from African American students in rural areas. And then from there, general questions. Part of me wants. I mean, I know that's a general question, and that's something that's seems like already been studied. Like the family. I'm still rated. What effect does? What's up? Um, yeah, I'm okay. I wonder if one thing that this class has shown me is, man, we got to be, if we're gonna be in these spaces here, we got to be on point. We got to be on point. You know what I mean? And it really makes me consider the things that we consider racism. Is it the fact that it is that, which it could be? I don't know, but I want to know how much of it is actual racism and how much of it could is or could be the fact that we're writing rhetorically in a space that needs, more direct research writing. Or are we speaking in the same language when it comes to articulating our value? That's something that needs to be considered as well in a world that tosses around accusations of racism and all that good stuff around so flippantly. Just got to be sure that that's what it really is, other than a multitude of other failures or misunderstandings or other things like that. That could be the actual case, rather than just saying racism, racism, racism. So this is going to be interesting to look into. Matter of fact, would that be a research question? You know what I mean? Like how many? I don't know yet. I like this boom arm though. It does real good on. They thought of all different kinds of ways the microphone can be. Because like even if I stand up, wanted to get in on some MC shit, I can do that too. You know, like 1, 2, 3. You know how it be. You know what I'm saying? Like it can go. I like this. I really do. It's actually has replaced my other microphone, Audio Technica 2020. I think that's what that was. I think this is the 2040. So if numbers mean anything, why does it take forever? But anyway, I'll holler at y'all. More studying to do.